the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the business of esports. Do you want to own your esports fandom and support your favorite content creators and gamers? Arterra Labs is a world-renowned NFT platform with a focus on esports and gaming markets. Their climate-neutral platform enables users to find, mint, trade, and purchase items from some of the top influencers and esports organizations. It's easy to use and even easier to sign up for. Don't miss out on the modern-day NFT gold rush. Just go to arterra.co to learn more. That's ARTERRA.co. From the keyboard to the boardroom, this is the Business of Esports podcast. I am Paul Dewalibi. I'm joined today by my friend and co-host, the Honorable Judge Jimmy Barata. For those of you who are new here, welcome to the official podcast of esports. What we do here is we cover the most pressing gaming and esports topics and news of the week, but we look at all of it through a business and C-suite lens. We dissect, we analyze the business implications of everything happening in this industry. For our regular listeners, thank you guys for tuning in every week. Thank you for all the love, the 5-star ratings and reviews. If you haven't yet, make sure to follow us everywhere, whether it's on social or subscribing to the podcast on Apple Podcasts or Spotify or Google Play or wherever you get our podcast. And if you love the content, leave a review. It really helps other people to find the podcast. Jimmy, how you doing this week?
Hey, Paul. Hey, listeners. Having a great day, great week. Happy podcast day to everybody. I'm here in my Business of Esports hoodie. I see Paul's in his BOE jersey for those of you watching.
There you go.
Yeah. And I'm excited, actually. Leaving on Friday for Cabo for a quick weekend and officially asking Paul's permission on live, or not live, but on recorded, on our recorded show.
Way of doing it.
In front of thousands of listeners so they know how kind and generous he is to let me leave.
This is so cheap. The problem is... Go ahead.
I have to catch up to your tan. I got to try and catch up to that tan.
I'm losing it. I feel like it's like it peaked, and now now I don't know what I'm doing wrong here, but I haven't been able to get any more tan. Yeah, I feel like that's the sign I need to get back to New York.
Must be.
But Jimmy, you could have come to visit in Florida. I don't know. You purposely picked somewhere else.
I want to visit Florida. I want to visit New York. I think we should go to we should follow so F1. Romantic, right? We should follow F1 across tour next year and to go to every city. I'm all for it.
As long as I don't get the bill, as long as I don't hear there's some some esports event in Cabo by chance or something, I'm okay with it. Jimmy, I don't want to waste any time. We have an absolutely, every week I'm amazed. This week, truly a legend. I think that's probably even understating it. A true legend of both the gaming industry, the toy industry, you name it, everything that touches fun. This man is a legend. We have none other on the podcast today than Bruce Stein. He's the founder, former CEO of aXiomatic for 7 years. He's touched on everything from Sony and PlayStation, been involved in gaming, technology, communication, his entire career. Welcome, Bruce, to the Business of Esports podcast.
Hey, thanks for having me. It's an honor to be here.
Bruce, it's an honor to have you. For our listeners who maybe don't know about you, I'm sure they know about your work, obviously, but who don't know about you, would love a bit of your story, your background, how you got into gaming, your interest in gaming, what you're focused on these days, some of the things you've done in the past, just a little bit of the Bruce Stein story.
Okay, well, I'll spare the parts that would be my mother's interest. But, most of my history, I think if I was going to put a label on it, would be I've been in the audience business. And when I was in the toy business, my audience was young. And when people would introduce me then, I used to like to say I've made a career of making Kids think they absolutely must have stuff they totally don't need. But it really was about trying to preserve childhood and make it more fun for another year, if you could get that, because once it's gone, it's tough to get back to. And after that, as my career in toys evolved, I started becoming interested in finding ways to engage the audience with different medias and mediums, right? So I started out with a medium that might have been plastic or plush, and then I migrated into what became, the PlayStation and video gaming. And when I looked at video gaming, I think it's a bit of a head fake to call it a competition. It has competition, but it's really a culture change in my mind. It's a change in the way a generation has come to interact and what they expect and the experiences they gain from a medium. And that's what has become the burden, let's just say, on publishers as well as studios, to be able to engage people in a way that allows them to do some things that, well, video gaming has some things that no other element has that interested me. It has story, right? There's lore, there's characters, there's champions. It has competition. It has social. And, with those elements, you have pervasive 24/7 connection. So this has changed, in my mind, the way generations for a while will relate to each other, and that's what fascinated me. And when I got into it, I was, always the oldest guy in the room, but it was an immense joy to listen to the stories. For instance, when we bought Team Liquid, Peter Guber and I started with that, and we made a majority investment in Team Liquid. And when I heard the stories of Victor Goossens and Steve Aronset, I found it astonishing. I just admired the passion and the dedication to it. And so, then, it became more and more of a venture as we said, hey, let's be in the media. Let's be in the medium. Let's commercialize IP in this space. And then, the year after, Ted Leonsis joined and others. And the company, after 7 years, I think did some of the best investments of any investment platform. We were probably the first to do things like Epic and Niantic and Dapper and things of that sort. So it's been a really fun journey. And, if you can find something to do for a living that's fun, you're ahead of the game.
Bruce, can we talk about that Team Liquid investment? Because I do think you guys were early and very smart there. And, obviously aXiomatic has made some really smart investments. You mentioned Epic, Niantic. These are, the top of the pile, right? These are the best companies in gaming right now. With Team Liquid, I'm curious how you frame, what was the sort of the deciding factor in terms of you putting money in an esports org like Team Liquid, right? What was the thing? I'm always curious how people bring their own context to these investments, right? A lot of people look at esports orgs like sports teams, right? Like no different than buying an NFL franchise. There are some people who look at it like buying a media business, right? This is about content and media. How did you look at that investment, and what was sort of the clincher for you?
Well, that's a layered question. I first started looking at this audience with a company called 3 Black Dot, which was formed by some ex-Machinima guys. And what they did was they used influencers to market a game. And I started to become aware, not really understanding. It seemed like internet hyperbole to see the numbers in the audience. And then when I saw what the Dota prize was, and this would have been about 2014, 15, maybe it was like 15 million. And I was like, is this possible? It's bigger than the Masters. It's bigger than the Stanley Cup. And then when I found out that the majority of that pool was crowdsourced, I was like, this is Tom Sawyer. These guys are getting an audience to pay for their event. This is just a dedicated, loyal, passionate audience that is there to be served. And so we looked at the the game space. And you may remember what it was like, say, in 2015. There was an announcement every week. Derek Jeter had a team, Shaquille O'Neal had a team. And there was all this noise. And we were just kind of saying, stop. We've been part of these land grabs, if you will, before. What do we need to make this work? I mean, it's not you're not buying the medium, you're buying a team, and the team is really different than traditional sports. They have competition, but that's where the similarity ends. You don't have gates, you don't have food and beverage, you don't have all of the traditional economics that a traditional sports team would have. So you have to kind of leave that at the door when you come in and say, there's competition, but that's where the similarity ends. And you have to be open to the discovery of what this can become. So if you're going to get there, and it's a journey, it's not a destination, right? So you're starting very early. 2015 was very early. You have to pick some people that you're going to journey with. And it all lives and dies on execution. And so we did diligence on 4 teams actively. And we found in Victor Goosens and Steve Aronset a set of partners that recognized it was a journey, that it's early on, and that we have to sign up this together so that we can make the terms both protective and balanced. And that when we found that group, that flipped a switch. We would have walked. I mean, there's an expression that was often used that I've never lost money on a deal I didn't do. We were okay if it didn't work out. We were not okay getting into something that was going to be an impossible thing for us to manage. And so by finding a couple of, let's just say, kindred spirits who were up for the journey, cherishing it, and they were of the cloth, which, I'm not. I'm a digital immigrant. I'm a voyeur in this space. I get to watch these guys, and it's a fabulous place to be. But that's what sort of did it for us. A belief in the audience, which at the time was 250 million for esports, and the gaming audience, and that's a subset, right, of gaming. Gaming maybe being, at the time, it was probably 2 billion, now maybe closer to 3. This is an intellectual property marketing business. Team Liquid's an intellectual property. And investing in winning is not for selling postseason seats, because we don't own the seats. So traditional sports guys have to get past traditional metrics if they're going to be able to realize the full value of what this team can become. So we invested in winning so that we could build the value of our audience in Team Liquid. And we went from being a team that was forever fourth to, we won North America League of Legends 4 times in a row. We won a Grand Slam in CSGO. We won the International in Dota. We have a world champion Super Smash Brothers Melee player in Hungrybox. And we made a brand for ourselves that was able to attract marketing partners who are also looking at this as a journey.
Bruce, it's interesting because esports org owners, I always sort of put them to task on defining where their team sits on my invented spectrum, right? With winning on one end being the most important and call it selling hoodies on the other end. And both are interesting business models, right? And I don't think one is better than the other. What is fascinating to me is, I always use Team Liquid as sort of the extreme example of winning, right? Because you guys have built a real history of fielding winning teams. It's so fascinating to me that you still look at it through your lens of audience building, despite the fact that winning is sort of in the DNA. It all comes back to you're in the audience business. Let me just sort of stretch that a little bit, which is, I mentioned in my intro, I think you're sort of in the fun business. If I look at your career, it's always been kind of defining what is entertainment, what is fun. Where do you see gaming, big picture, fitting into that? Do you think this becomes the dominant form of entertainment over the next 20 years? Do you think other industries sort of get swallowed by it? Where does gaming fit in the ecosystem of fun or entertainment audience in your mind?
It's a really, really interesting question. I think that when Facebook changed to Meta, They did it because they recognized that what Epic is creating in their metaverse is almost a Facebook with a purpose, right? You can get your music there. You can have a music experience that enabled you to do something you can't do in the traditional game, which made it Music Plus. And the music business has been suffering trying to find another venue or way to make money beyond just a live event business that's efficient. And this was that. So the evolution of the meta, I think, is going to be something that we are at the very beginning of, and we should probably not recognize it in 10 years. It will be it will become a place where people can find both privacy and reach. And there's a lot to sort through. But what you asked before, which is really an important question, is what does that do to all the other media formats? There's only so much digestible media time you have in a day, right? And I think from a company standpoint, one place that companies, I think, will have a big challenge is if you're a public company that is trying to support a legacy infrastructure in a different media. Because if you were a traditional music label and you were selling CDs, you all of a sudden had a really difficult time. If you were Kodak and you were selling film, you all of a sudden had a really difficult time. But what they did in common is they were, as public companies, they couldn't take the time off from the quarterly treadmill reporting obligations to reinvent themselves. And then, what happens is reality comes and bites you in the ass. And, it's incumbent on the management of traditional IP creators and studios to invent themselves for where audience is going so that they can adjust their models, or don't complain when you're victimized by it. This isn't an incidental thing. The amount of people that are in 100 million monthly active users in League of Legends, 60, 70 million in Epic. Go through the metaverses and look how much time people are playing there. Look at the Call of Duty audience. That audience isn't going to be available to the traditional content providers. So they're either going to have to find an effective, cost-efficient way to market to what's left, or they're going to get victimized by it. And so I think this will see an influx of capital, both in terms of IP creation, in terms of what the experience is for the metaverse participants. And I think we're going to see it redefine itself. I mean, I'm old enough to know when video games started as Pong on an airplane, right? It was, a black screen with two little paddles. And I thought this was Flash Gordon the first time I saw it. So it was a pretty amazing departure. What you can do now inside of creative mode of Epic is you can create your own universe for you to have a neighborhood, and you can be part of the larger one if you want to. With that kind of optionality in experience, I think you're going to see IP shape audiences, right? So the same IP, the same title doesn't work for the same audience. And that's the systematic risk in this business that is a harder one to get your arms around. You know what I mean by that? The IP itself, you're not really going to be able to get a lot of people in the 50 plus range watching Call of Duty. Yep. So you're going to have to find a way that you pull them in. And by the way, the other piece of this, which from an audience standpoint should be mentioned, is the tailwind that the industry has on audience demographics, right? So the kids growing up are not going to be watching 3 networks and a bunch of cable stations. So, they're going to be doing things in a different way. And then it becomes, who's going to be the last to reinvent themselves or find a way to manipulate their existing assets to work in this medium?
Bruce, does that, sorry, I just want to riff off that a little bit. Does that make you worried for your old colleagues at Mattel, for example, right? Where the kids are growing up with an iPad in their hands and they're probably playing, Rocket League or Fortnite or, And so do we see entire industries like be at risk? Like, is the toy industry in trouble because you have every 8-year-old or 10-year-old growing up with an iPad in their hands and they're all playing these games?
I don't think there's one avocation or fun activity that is going to take all of people's time. And there's a place for a physical toy in a kid's hand to be able to use it as a vessel to project into. And I think that will always be there. The bigger challenge for some of those companies is going to be how distribution changes. When you have, the majority of we used to have when I was in the toy business at Kenner, we'd have a list of 30 top customers. Now there's 4 that make up 85% of the business. So that's a different challenge. And then as happens with other industries, when the economics get tight and you're public, you often see a reduction in R&D spending. And when that happens, I think you can become victim to a death spiral in the company, because a toy company must have innovation. Every year you have to have about 80% of your product line reinvented. So if you pull back in R&D, either within a toy company or within a gaming company, I think that's the first indicator, a leading indicator that the company's in trouble.
I just want to take half a step back, because you talked about the importance of IP and engaging and mobilizing these audiences, and it's something that's come up a couple of times for us. I'm curious in your mind, Bruce, and if you could talk us through that a little bit more. Do you see that as the creation of new IP, new games that engage younger audiences, perhaps the adaptation of existing IPs from books and movies into gaming that can also grab those audiences that are familiar with those worlds and characters, a combination? And also, who do you think's doing it best right now, or at least which one? As well as, who do you think has great IP that's just not currently being fully tapped into that potential?
Well, when I was at a big toy company, I worried most about the little toy companies, because they were the ones who were willing to take a risk on something that seemed ludicrous, like Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Nobody could pronounce it when it first happened. Everybody was saying Mutant Turtles Ninja. And then Cabbage Patch was created by a tiny company. And who wanted to market an ugly doll, right? But it was about adoption, and the adoption theme played well to parents. And they found a way for these small companies to take a chance on IP that larger companies couldn't afford to do. They want to reinvent their own existing franchises, partly for financial reasons, because if they have an increase in revenue in something other than their mainstay lies, the street takes that as a leading indicator that their product's in trouble. But I think that what does IP really do, and where does it fall? IP, let's take a form of IP of music. If you look at decades, you find that almost every generation has found a cultural icon that has changed what framed their whole experience. So there was Frank Sinatra, there was Elvis Presley, then there were Beatles, then there was, a whole list of other music formats that each generation took on as its own sort of cultural identity. And I think that need for, or that desire to have something culturally that resonates with a affinity group or a target audience is going to continue. And there will be there's no doubt in my mind that there will be new IPs within the next, whatever it is, 10 years, 5 years, where something breaks out from the clutter and redefines what we think of as IP. I mean, Fortnite, became a phenomenon, but it hasn't been around that long, right? And go back to, I did toys for Batman, for Star Wars, Jurassic Park, Alien, Terminator, Predator, Ghostbusters, Silver Hawks. And the reason we did that was we created a business model at this company, Kenner, that allowed us to optimize the things that worked and navigate title risk. And title risk is inescapable in our businesses. What the reason people go to the Fortnite side is they're attracted to an IP. They're not. It's what Peter used to say. It's about oohs and ahs, not ones and zeros, and that's really what people go for. They go for a benefit. We don't sell. And I used to think about this in the toy business and the game business. We don't sell any products. We think we do, but what we sell are benefits. And the example that I've used most often is that there are millions and millions of 3/4-inch drill bits sold every year, but people are really buying the whole. So to the extent we create new holes for new audiences that capture their imagination and give them an identity, those are going to prevail. And that's part of the beauty of this business. And the best companies are going to be those that are structured economically to take those shots so they can still be relevant when new ones come around, while also building the brands that they have.
Bruce, do you think like a Fortnite has the legs as IP similar to like a Batman or a Star Wars where, 20 years from now, we will be building on top of that Fortnite IP. Epic will be building on top of that. Others will be, licensing Fortnite IP. Like, do you think games, and I ask this because one of the criticisms of the gaming industry is that games, for the most part, Call of Duty, World of Warcraft sort of aside, there are some, CSGO, there are some exceptions. For the most part, games sort of come and go, right? And because it's technology at its core, the graphics of game XYZ 5 years from now are no longer cutting edge and people maybe don't want to play it. Do you see gaming IP sort of surviving and lasting and having the legs as some of those entertainment brands that you mentioned?
So we used to call in the toy business brands or IP that could last as having open-ended play. Okay, so in the case of Batman was maybe the perfect IP for toys, right? Because he was a mortal who had issues. So he had vulnerabilities, and we liked vulnerabilities, and he needed stuff to get it done. So for a toy company, it's the motherlode of IPs. Superman was a terrible IP. The reason is, he doesn't need a plane. He doesn't need a car. He just has a cape. And so what can you sell? A cape and a tight suit? I mean, it's a very difficult, and with any IP, if the hero becomes so indestructible and he's only vulnerable to a rock, he almost becomes a bully, right? I think the question of gaming IP, if you think of IPs that have the ability to morph, they are the ones that the character is a vessel from which the person can project, the avatar, and you can go on new experiences. If it's very defined and limited, then you're only going to get that audience that finds that particular journey interesting. And so the nature, I don't think all IPs are created equal. I think that brands have the ability to, you have the ability to make games, have longevity. But, we used to say in the toy business, right when we were out of ideas, we would have things glow in the dark, like the Ghostbuster figures. But what happened is you reach an end to what you could do with it. And by the way, we were not selling the characters. We were selling to kids how you feel beating ghosts. That's the benefit. So you got over a fear. So if you can, within the scope of a game, deliver benefits that are emotional and relevant, then I think the IP can continue. If you can't, I think it's going to be very limited.
It's beyond insightful, I think. I've never heard it put so well. I love that. Bruce, let's sort of big picture question again. I've been somewhat critical on the show of, some of the esports specific or gaming specific VCs in the space. I look at the portfolio for aXiomatic, and you guys have, Team Liquid, an esports org. You have Epic Games, a metaverse play game developer. You have Niantic, game developer. AR play. You have Nifty Games, game developer. And then you have things like Dapper Labs, which is, blockchain, NFT stuff. And I'm trying to sort of think through what is the thesis for you guys as investors, right? What is the aXiomatic thesis? And, without maybe giving away too much of the secret sauce, I'd love to understand what are you guys trying to build as aXiomatic from a portfolio perspective?
Okay, well, I'm no longer at aXiomatic as CEO. I still am a big owner, and I still want it to do really well. And I have real confidence in the portfolio. And here's what made the portfolio great. We're all really neurotic. Okay, we don't think we get it. And so when I looked at this space, we wanted to be in esports with a team and a management team within that team that we believed could take us the journey. And we could do things differently, like Team Liquid did with the Alienware deal, like they did with the Coinbase deal. They've in the Alienware deal, we are the first group to do training facilities. Everybody else had a house. And I looked at those houses and I was like, oh my God, I mean, someone's going to call me at 3 a.m. and there's going to be a backed up toilet. This is going to need to grow up a little. The thesis that I had from the beginning is our demographic and our target is gamers. It's not just esports. That's a subset of it. It's all gamers, and we've still not seen gamer groups commercialized, like fully commercialized, like women, minorities, younger kids in esports, and mobile esports. And when I looked at that and I thought about the space, there's going to be a lot of people who are gamers who aren't going to be into esports. You can't make them get that way. But we can be that way by investing into companies that do target those brands. So how do we get away from having the kind of investment that is, quote, like a Flappy Birds, where it's here and then gone? Right. And the way we did that, and my thesis at the time was I wanted to find companies that had an unfair advantage in navigating title risk. So in the case of Epic, they had the Unreal Engine. And I used to say that, and I still believe this, that Fortnite is far more than a game and Epic is far more than Fortnite. That's why what was compelling to us. And we believed in the team. Still do. In the case of Niantic, the real world engine, John Hankey's vision for being able to do a mobile game, okay, that's a different audience. Okay, it's not the same audience that's going to be watching an esports game or the same audience that might be at Fortnite, but it's a gamer audience we want to have in our mix if we're addressing that demographic. Like Niantic, Harry Potter didn't work. They're on to the next one. That's part of the risk of the space, having a title. It's both the agony and the ecstasy, to use the phrase they used to use on ABC Wild World of Sports. So our premise was make sure we have something that is either defensible or gets us past an industry risk element in an efficient way. And the like Nifty was those, we know there's a business in what were Madden football and sophisticated sports. They have the league licenses. That's a point of difference. So in each case, we found a point of difference. What we didn't do was make a lot of investments. We made 12. 9 worked. And of those 9, that's probably 90% of our invested capital. So we got committed to something and then dedicated a lot to it. So that way, if we do most things right with those pieces and we get a little bit lucky, it makes a lot of money. And that was the beginning and the end of the thesis. Now, it's like everything else, during the internet days, everybody was running all over trying to find internet investments. Before that, there were leveraged buyouts. Before that, there was money. And after that, there was mortgage-backed securities. This gaming theme, I think it's an enormous opportunity by virtue of its size of audience and its accessibility. The challenge is that not everything will work. It's still about execution and about premise. And I think you have to look for risk mitigators in those models that make you comfortable that you can, if it has to be this one game, this one time has to work or we're dead, it's probably not the right kind of investment for somebody like me.
I'm curious how, post aXiomatic now, I assume you get approached by a lot of companies, Bruce, looking for your experience, obviously your relationships, obviously because of everything you've accomplished in the industry. When you see all of these companies, when they come to you, is there anything at a more micro level? We talked a lot about macro level, at a micro level, that you see companies in the gaming space all doing wrong, or all doing something that you think they're thinking about it the wrong way? Like, what if you had to point to one thing you could be critical of all the companies that you've talked to, been approached by in this space? Do you think they're all missing, or they could be doing better?
I may not have the answer. I may have some answers. I think the biggest mistake that people can make is to come into the industry and expect it to behave like other industries they've been in. Okay, it may not. It won't evolve the same way. They may not go public. A company may not go public at the same time. If Epic had gone public with just Fortnite before they entered Rocket League, before they built out the metaverse, it's a much riskier story. So even though for a lot of investors, they want a category, that is, we want something that's growth. We want something that's venture. I think you have to make a commitment to the space of the audience and say the time frames will be different, but the rewards can be asymmetrical because it has that kind of ability with this size audience. And ultimately, everybody's saying, well, the brands are slow to market to this. Yeah, because they don't understand it. And what'll happen is once they understand it, they'll all flood to it. But that isn't a reason to give up on the space. I think that, what's happened with teams, there was all this hoopla about teams. It was musical chairs. Everybody was trying to get a team. And, when even in our conversations with Liquid, we said, if you're looking for the biggest offer, we're not the right guys. We're going to give you a fair offer that you live by and we live by, and we're going to make a commitment to it. And if we both live up to it, we're going to be happy. But if this was about one transaction and out, this is the wrong space. You should just buy, an equity that you want to trade and that looks like it's a buy recommendation. This isn't going to look like that. It's, it's a different kind of industry. And the more you try to shove it into another industry hole, the more you're going to miss the opportunity, because you'll either get off too early or spend too much time up front. And I think the people that, if this was a story of an industry where the audience was shrinking, I'd be much more concerned about it. But you have a probably 15% year-on-year growth in the audience, about a 40% year-on-year increase in media consumed. I think it's up to guys like in my generation to look at it and learn from you, which, by the way, was one of the most wonderful parts of the whole experience of being around Liquid and taking pictures from all these game guys is, you learn something from a group that comes at it with an incredibly different set of sensibilities. And if you're not arrogant, if you can check your ego at the door and you can learn from them and they can do the same in checking their ego at the door, then I think the combination of the yin and yang of both experience as well as their feel for a new medium can deliver some extraordinary results.
Love it.
Jimmy, I don't know if you had anything before I get to everyone's favorite new segment.
Yeah, just one more thing before we wrap, Bruce, is, next few years, next big thing, where are you spending your time, your energy? Is it NFTs? I mean, what's the next, I don't know, what's taking your attention? What's exciting to you that interplays or overlaps or whatever metaphor or description you choose to incorporate? But, what's of interest to you and what's the next step in your journey?
Well, I think the most important next step is that I redefined what an investor group looks like, so that they come into this eyes open about how big the opportunity is, yet sober about the way you build it. And sober about the fact that it doesn't fall into a category of, they're all going to be venture investments or they're all going to be growth. Those are categories for investors, not category for a sector. You want to find people that have sector, I have sector respect and interest and passion, but I don't want them, if it requires me to limit myself to a category of investment for a particular kind of investor, I think that is the tail wagging the dog. I think you want to be with a group of people who are committed to the medium and building it for what it becomes, because that's where you're going to get discovery. And, there's going to be many more versions of things like NFTs. And if you're going at this with blinders, trying to make it fit another model, I think as investors, you're going to find it frustrating in terms of the time that it takes to realize it, but also the speed at which the changes are happening.
Bruce, for our audience, we introduced a segment maybe 5 or 10 episodes ago now. We're calling it Judge Jimmy's Cross-Examination, where hopefully we get to know you, Bruce, as a person a little better. So you're going to get 5 questions, rapid fire here. No stress, obviously, but trying to get more insight into the person here.
Oh God, this isn't going to be like the Family Feud lightning round, right? Where you say, come up with an animal with 3 letters in its name, and I'm going to say alligator, and you're going to.
Jimmy would need a better mustache for that, but otherwise pretty similar, I think. Go ahead, Jimmy.
These will be fun and quick and easy, Bruce. First one, what's your favorite show or movie or kind of genre to watch on television?
On television, it's probably Curb Your Enthusiasm.
Oh, great! I just finished last night.
I feel like they've taken my best jokes and the best chapters from my life.
I love that. I just caught up yesterday, actually. Next question: what's your top favorite or your favorite cuisine? Your top food choice?
I think that it would have to be, American food. I'm pretty boring that way. I don't.
You like it's fair enough.
Do you eat while you game at all?
No, I'm not well enough coordinated to do that. I've seen those guys online do that, and I envy it because it takes. The CS:GO team tried to teach me how to play, and I thought if I could last a minute and a half, I was ahead of the game. Unfortunately, I grew up on consoles with the Sony PlayStation, and most of the players think of that as miniature golf. It doesn't seem, like why would you do that? It makes no sense. But no, so I cannot eat and game. I just can't.
I hear that quite a bit. I think it's a common problem. In that line, Bruce, what's your favorite esports or video game to watch?
Well, so this is an amazing story. When I first got into looking at esports and League of Legends, I took my family to Riot to watch a League of Legends game, and nobody was interested. We didn't know the team yet. There was nothing like that. My wife is technophobic. I'm literally technophobic, and she started watching it, and I can tell you that she is a far bigger fan of League of Legends than I am. And this is why I was talking why it's so early. There's a couple of announcers, Kobe and Captain Flowers on and Riot. My wife will do anything to watch those. We went to vacation in Hawaii. When we could find her, she was inside watching a League of Legends game. I had to take a picture of her during the last playoffs when it was a best of 5. She had atrial fibrillation. We had to go to the ER, and I sent it to a picture of us in the ER to Steve Aaron's set, and he sent a picture back of Tactical he did this message for her. But what happened is that content has been curated for a larger audience. It's what John Madden did to football. Okay, he made it digestible to a larger demographic than just hardcore gamers, because you get them for free, right? They're going to watch anyhow. But when you start curating it the way they've done it, you start picking up people you would never expect. I get into bed at night, my wife's reading Reddit, and this is somebody who not only is she technophobic, she's never played a video game.
That's fascinating.
That's a tipping point. If you can unravel that and make that content appeal to broader demographics, sky's the limit.
I love it. That brings me to another great question I want to follow in that regard is, what class, topic, or major would you recommend to a student today?
So my I don't know that I would have the recommendation, but I love what my son did with business information systems. He knows programming, he knows finance, but making it, again, it's making the content digestible. It's making it information actionable. Data by itself is nothing. Did you ever get like a statement from, even a credit card company that uses pages? You're like, oh my God, I can't. But making content and data digestible is the way that you bring what is computational information to the masses. And I think that you got a great job out of college, you're doing really well, but I think that kind of interpretive data career is going to give you untold abilities, because that also goes to, what data do you interpret for, for teams in terms of who's watching and for what and for how long. So I like that major.
No, great advice. Thank you. I'll wrap it up with one more. What was your favorite IP that you sold? Either it was the most fun, the most lucrative. You mentioned so many amazing titles, from Alien and Terminator, and I just, please take it away.
So my probably my favorite toy experience that way was Nerf, because we, in an acquisition, were able to get it at Kenner. It had been a preschool ball line, for little kids with big sponges. And they had done one little blaster. And I went into a design room, and all of the designers had created weapon versions of it. And they were having a fight, in this. And, I did what I do best. I got out of the way of people with an idea. And they turned it into Pro Nerf and all kinds of weapons. And it went from being a $25 million business to a $500 million business. And, it's still, I still have, memories of parents calling me up mad about where they're finding darts. But you know what? It became it was a amazing transition of seeing a brand rebranded, taken to a new benefit, and expanded the audience without even violating what its authentic purpose was. So that's unquestionably my favorite. And I do love Batman, because he is vulnerable. I mean, he's a complex character and he has depth. And then not to mention the fact that we could put him in, an outfit for the sky and an outfit for the water. And, we had a experience even with Jurassic Park where Spielberg came to our offices and he looked at the design for the visitor center, and he picked it up and he put it on his set designer's desk and he said, "Do this." And, when you find creative people who embrace other people's creative efforts, even though it's a different medium, you couldn't keep people out of the building for months. They were working their guts out because somebody had appreciated their vision. And, it just goes to show you that if you don't try to be pedantic, but listen, there's no telling what you can get from people. And for me, it was the best part of, my gaming experience the last 7 years was, being part of all the people that I got to interact with at Liquid.
It's a great lesson for us all, Bruce, and I appreciate it. And, thank you for coming on the show. Paul, I'll give it back to you. I'm just so taken it back and very happy with our time today. So prosecution rests, and thanks, Bruce.
Bruce, before I let you go, I have one last question, and it's because it's so relevant right now. It's so topical right now. I just love your 2-minute comment on it. What do you think of the Microsoft Activision Blizzard acquisition? Are you a big fan of this? Just your general thoughts.
I don't think of Microsoft. I mean, Microsoft had some great titles that they never did much with, like Crimson Skies, which was early Xbox days, one of my favorite games played with kids. And it was almost a precursor to The Last of Us, where there was narrative within the competition, right? I hope they allow the studio. Blizzard's an enormously creative group. Activision is an enormously creative group. What they have done with their titles is nothing short of astonishing. And I hope that Microsoft takes the role of the humble acquirers. It's not a word you typically associate with Microsoft, but if they want to get a lot out of that group, don't go in and try to tell them what to do. They've been phenomenally successful. And look at them as getting one segment of the audience, one segment of the business, empower them to do everything they're doing, and then find other ways to augment the audience. I hope that's what they do. And if they do, it will be nothing short of brilliant, because it got them down a path that would have taken them, if they ever would have gotten there, forever to do. I also think it's going to, I'm curious what it does to people like Sony. Okay, their console business, I don't remember the exact numbers, but say it's 30% of their revenues, but 40 or 50% of their profits. They're going to have to think about what the ramifications are of this. I mean, it's in Microsoft's best interest to keep it open platform, but there's a expression by Einstein that he said, two things are infinite: the universe and human stupidity. And I'm not so sure about the universe. And so you just don't know how people will react to this, but they have a jewel, and they have a chance to fix stuff that maybe has stifled it. Blizzard's an incredible company. Activision's an incredible company. It's a fabulous acquisition. It really gets down to what we talked about before. It's all about execution, and how they execute this in making that group feel special will determine whether or not they realize the full value.
Bruce, I'm so glad I got to ask you that question. I know our audience is going to love hearing your insight. I mean, you're a true legend. I think we're spoiling our audience this week. We could probably have done 4 hours. I wish we could. You just have that much knowledge and insight and experience. I am truly humbled to have you on the show.
Thanks very much.
If you want to be followed, Bruce, or found, or maybe a project you're working on, or a company or something, where can people find more or follow, or if you want to be?
Well, I'm on LinkedIn, and I used that early on because I found it a good way to keep in touch with people in different industries that I'm either not active with, or and Twitter was a late start for me. I wasn't so sure I was interested in what I had to say, much less anybody else. So, my Bruce Stein Twitter account is not something that I use a lot, but when I do, I do it with projects that are really important and I'm passionate about. One of the foundations I've been involved with for a long time was Scleroderma Research Foundation, and recently our good friend Bob Saget passed away, and I found it cathartic to share that. And it wasn't trying to do it for anything other than you don't know what to do when something like that happens. And so anyhow, if people are interested, great. I don't do a lot of tweeting, but what I do, if you're interested, you can be found there and then on LinkedIn.
I love that, Bruce. Thank you again. And for our listeners, for our viewers, thank you guys again for tuning in every week. Make sure to follow us everywhere. It's Business of Esports or Biz Esports on every platform: Instagram, TikTok, Twitter, YouTube, LinkedIn, you name it. Business of Esports and Biz Esports everywhere. And as always, guys, we will see you next week.
One thing I would add, guys, and this isn't meant to be a blowing smoke at you guys. Thanks for asking important questions. Because I think if the industry becomes, an industry of self-congratulation, and where people believe too much because there's a lot of people willing to throw money at it, you lose your humility. And I think when you guys hold people to account, it's the best chance we have of accomplishing really cool things.
I appreciate that, Bruce. I think, sometimes maybe people I think I'm too critical, but it's because I love this and I believe in this, right? I want to see it succeed, not because I'm trying to tear anything down. So thank you again. And as always, guys, see you next week.
Take care.